Hi there, I'm Siobhan. I make figure drawings and I focus on a very natural and responsive way of drawing. If you're new to this channel, this is Art Skills Online. This is where I post a video every week, I share my process, and I also offer tips and techniques for how to develop your own expressive style of drawing through drawing the figure. So if you're at all interested in figure drawing, please consider subscribing so we can stay in touch. Leave a comment below about your thoughts about how to approach figure drawing. So today I wanted to share this charcoal drawing with you and talk a little bit about ways to better understand the gesture of a pose or how to use gesture drawing in your work to make it a bit more unified or a bit more cohesive. There are many ways to approach gesture or to understand gesture, but I find that this way of thinking about it is really helpful and really useful, especially if you're drawing the figure from life. So here's the video. I'll also talk a little bit about the materials that I used, and then I'll check back in with you at the end. To start this drawing, I'm trying to get the whole aspect of the figure down with my marks. So you can call this like a line of action or something like that, but really these kinds of initial marks are a few lines of action, and they all together will make up the gesture of the pose. We talk a lot about gesture as being like a way to capture energy or essence, but that's a bit abstract really. And one thing that was pointed out to me very strongly in that book I talked about last week, The Natural Way to Draw. By the way, I posted a video last week about this book. It's an excellent resource for figure drawing. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link in the description, or I'll leave a link up here on the screen. But basically in that book, gesture is talked about as being the unifying aspect of your drawing. And for me, I think that's really the best way to think about what gesture is, and to think about how to look for it in the pose, and then to think about how to work with it. Any pose of the model that you look at is always going to have like a lot going on. There's so many movements within the pose. There's a lot of directions, angles to think about. So think about your gestural mark as something that's going to unify all of those separate parts. And for me, that's helpful because then you don't have to try and draw one section at a time at the beginning. You don't have to get lost in details right away. You stay very much with regard to the whole pose and before you dial into the details. Then when you work like this, it means that you do have to stay very light and loose from the outset and only very slowly, add your details over time. I think it's also a really good approach to help you break down proportion and scale in a very intuitive way, and in a way that doesn't break from your drawing or from the way you are connected to your drawing. So for example, I'm just really as lightly as possible here trying to figure out all of the parts of the pose and how they fit together by just letting the charcoal travel all over the page. And I think as much as I can, I'm trying to link that movement of the charcoal with the way that I'm looking, or I should say with the sort of the speed that my eyes are traveling. And for me, that's a really good way to work out proportion and scale. And the beauty of it is that any corrections that I have to make are kind of like part of the drawing, or it's easy to make corrections. It's not a big deal. Well, for me anyway, it doesn't matter to me if I have to move things around. I think, for example, the head was incorrectly placed in the first initial pass, but that's okay. I just leave those marks in. Then once you do have everything mapped out, then you can sort of get really detailed and work a little bit more carefully and pick out lines to define and refine what you've sort of laid down. So to think about gesture as being this unifying part of your drawing, it's interesting to me because gesture can really speak to how things change over time. I'm always thinking about how when you're drawing the model, especially when you're drawing from life, the model can change position incrementally, or perhaps maybe even the light in the room will move and change. So I used to get really frustrated with that, but now I'm trying to think about how it could be interesting to express those changes in a drawing rather than to make a drawing that's of something that's immovable, or you could even say a bit lifeless. When you're drawing from a photo, you don't have any of the challenges of changing light or the model moving in the pose or even breathing. You don't have any of that sort of life to deal with. You just have a kind of flat image that's frozen in time, and it's just something to think about. Do you want to draw a non-moving image, or do you want to capture something that really was never still in the first place? I'm making this drawing from a photo reference, but these are just thoughts that really came up through the drawing and made me think about how we do also want to try and capture a little bit of the movement. Let me know in the comments what you think. What is your approach based on? Is it based on drawing from a photo or trying to approximate that controlled image? Or do you keep in mind drawing from life and things like the shifting light or the model moving? In this drawing, lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about the materials. I worked with compressed charcoal, so that usually comes in quite long sticks, and I just break those sticks up into shorter pieces and work like that. Compressed charcoal is very messy to work with. I mean, even just handling it for a few seconds, your hands can get very, very grubby. So that's just something to bear in mind. Another thing to think about when you're working with compressed charcoal is it does make a difference what paper you draw on. So I'm drawing on very cheap newsprint, and I find that that's actually the best type of paper to work with charcoal. If you try and work with compressed charcoal on nice, expensive, good quality, heavy paper, you won't necessarily get the same effect of, let's say, the shaded marks versus thin lines. Newsprint is really light and smooth, so it gives you a really nice surface to draw on. So it's great, newsprint and compressed charcoal. So thank you so much for watching this video all the way through to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some useful information out of it, or at least got some inspiration for your own drawing practice. Please let me know below what your thoughts are about gesture drawing and about drawing from life. I'd love to hear from you, or just say hi. Consider giving this video a like if you think it's worthwhile. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.